Good evening to all our distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. May I invite the following dignitaries to kindly come on a stage and take their respective places. Dr. Jennifer Griffin, Raymond C. Baumhart S.J., Professor of Business Ethics and Professor of Strategy, Loyola University, USA. Father E. Abraham, Director of XLRI. Dr. Ashish K. Pani, Dean Academics of XLRI. Father Oswald Mascarenhas, JRD Tata Chair Professor of Business Ethics. Please stand for the prayer song of XLRI Choir. Please be seated. May I request Dr. Griffin and other dignitaries to please come and light the lamp. May I request Ms. Anjali Meheria to present a bouquet to Dr. Jennifer Griffin. May I request Father Abraham to give his welcome address and introduce Dr. Jennifer Griffin to the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, Father Abraham.
Dr. Jennifer Griffin, Professor of Strategy, and Raymond C. Baumhart S.J., Professor of Business Ethics, Loyola University, Quinlan School of Business, Speaker of the 27th Annual JRD Tata Oration on Business Ethics, Mr. T.V. Narendran, Chairman, Board of Governors, XLRI, and CEO and Managing Director of Tata Steel. Dr. Jayarani is not here, I don't see him. Mrs. Ruchi Narendran, Dr. Kevin Stephens, Dean of Loyola University Chicago Business School, members of the Board of Governors, esteemed guests, faculty, staff, students, and alumni, members of the press and media, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to the 27th annual JRD Tata Oration on Business Ethics, an event that has been of singular significance to us ever since it was initiated in 1991. Like last year, we have decided to host the oration on JRD's death anniversary, which is today. In 1991, XLRI, in association with a few select Tata group of companies, established the JRD XLRI Chair Tata Foundation for Business Ethics to mark their long-standing commitment and contribution to business ethics in India. The foundation seeks to address itself by publicly affirming the imperative need for adopting ethics in business and striving to shape an enabling ecosystem to foster ethical practices in business. The activities that are undertaken by this foundation include the annual JRD Tata Oration in Business Ethics and cutting-edge research and publication in the field of business ethics. Father Rossi Mascarenas, the JRD Tata Chair Professor in Business Ethics, sponsored by Tata Steel, will brief us on the activities. Mr. JRD Tata himself, a role model extraordinary, as the first orator, set the bar high for the successive ethics orations for over 2 decades. We at XLRI have been truly privileged to have had distinguished speakers from different realms to visit us here in Jamshedpur and share with us their thoughts and experiences in the field of business ethics and many other walks of life. It is indeed a privilege for me to introduce to you our speaker for this evening, Dr. Jennifer Griffin. Dr. Griffin is Professor of Strategy and Raymond C. Baumhart, SJ, Professor of Business Ethics, and Loyola University Chicago, Quinlan School of Business. Engaged at all levels of learning, executive, doctoral, graduate, undergraduate, including online and experiential study abroad courses, Dr. Griffin examines how firms continuously co-create value. Annually, she leads corporate strategy, social impact, and strategy-oriented CSR workshops for Australian, Chilean, and US executives, as well as periodically in Brazil, India, and Lebanon. Award-winning author of the Academy of Management 2017 SIM Best Book Award for her Cambridge University Press book, Managing Corporate Impacts, Co-Creating Value. Dr. Griffin has received numerous research awards and grants, including IABS Best Paper Award in 20 years for a co-authored article, Corporate Social Performance and Corporate Financial Performance, 25 years of incomparable research. It remains among the most cited articles in business and society. Her research is published in multiple disciplines: Public Administration Review, Business and Society, Journal of Business Ethics, Group and Organization Development, Business and Politics, Corporate Reputation Review, and so on. She has published several book chapters for the United Nations Principles for Responsible Management Education series, the Doing Well by Doing Good series, the Handbook for Public Affairs, and the Accountable Corporation series, among others. She is also an associate editor of Business and Society and a senior editor of the Oxford Research Encyclopedia. Dr. Griffin is a board member of Keep America Beautiful and an invited speaker for numerous organizations around the world, including Larsen & Toubro. Dr. Griffin, an award-winning educator, received the GW School of Business highest teaching award, the Teaching Excellence Award, as well as the MBA Faculty of the Year Award. 8 times in the past decade, doctoral students nominate her for the Peter J. Vail Award for Best GWSB Doctoral Professor. She is most proud of the student-led nominations for the National Inspire Integrity Teaching Award. Dr. Griffin, we are eagerly looking forward to your oration. XLRI has always emphasized the importance of adopting an ethical code of conduct within the corporate world. We believe that no management education curriculum is entirely complete unless and until the students are instilled with a set of values that are necessary decision-making ingredients for the corporate managers of today. It is for this reason that a core course on managerial ethics is offered to all our students in XLRI. Globalization has further enhanced the importance of ethical, moral compass in business. Globalization means that business strategy and business ethics cannot be separated from each other. Corporations have entered a new era, the prove to me era. Unethical practices and organizations are not being shrugged off anymore, and even reputed organizations and some outstanding CEOs are being named, shamed, and fined or imprisoned in their ethical lapses world over. The culture of an organization is established by the tone set at the top. Chief executives must lead by example. As a leader of your organization, you must ask yourself, if you built a house with your work ethics and dedication, would you trust its foundation enough to live in it? I once again welcome you all to the 27th Annual JRD Tata Oration Business Ethics. Thank you, and may God bless you all.
Thank you, Father. May I now request Father Oswald Mascarenhas, JRD Tata Chair Professor of Business Ethics of XLRI, to present an update on the JRD Tata Ethics Chair activities. Ladies and gentlemen, Father Oswald.
My dear friends, great respected guests, very honored faculty, and my friends on the dais, students, and all other people who have come from our far and near institutions of friendship and collaboration. I will not stand too long between you and the great speaker of the day. My report is very short. December 2018, the JRD Tata Chair of Business Ethics completes 5 years. And the Tata XLRI Ethics Research Center, hereafter TXLERC, records 4.5 years. The center is proud to report the following scholarly activities of November 2017-2018. XLRI is the only B school in India that has a sponsored chair for business ethics, thanks to Tata Steel. This is named after JRD Tata. The chair has enabled to make business ethics a core course for all students in the HRM, BM, GMP, BM, Weekend, and VIL programs, as also design and conduct MDP programs at XLRI and in-company ethics programs. Having completed research on unfolding organizational ethics culture at Tata Hitachi, now we have launched since June 2016, a similar study of Tin Plate Company of India. Collaborative research design, executive unstructured interviews, and data collection and data analysis is over. Report writing will be finished within the next 2 months. Meanwhile, XLRI has written a concept paper for a similar, perhaps more comprehensive study of organizational ethics culture of other Tata companies like Tata Steel. Benjamin Barra, with Father Mascarenhas as the TAC chair, worked all through the project at Tin Plate as part of his doctoral research and dissertation, and was awarded FPM doctoral degree during convocation in March 2018. December 21, 2017, a one-day company program for very senior managers of Tata Steel was conducted at XLRI. The program was titled Putting People First, Ethical Leadership on Values, Respectful Workspace, and Ethical Decision-Making at XLRI. Several such one-day programs for Tata Steel are planned and scheduled for the days to come. Possibly some in Jamshedpur, some in Kolkata and Kalinganagar. March 8-9, 2018, in-company program on building ethical and moral leadership skills for Tata Power SED, that is Special Engineering Design, Electronic City, Bangalore was conducted. July-September 2018, we refloated the brand new elective of last year titled Ethics for Business Turnaround Management. It registered 102 students this year, and we had to run in 2 batches. Father Raja Reddy, doctoral student in finance, FPM, XLRI, was my assigned teaching assistant, and he did a great job in taking some sessions, correcting all assignments, as also conducting the vivas. Among senior guest lecturers were Mr. Rana Sinha, who shared turnaround senior experiences from ITC and Tata Hitachi, and Mr. Bhushan Raina, who shared experiences from Tin Plate in sessions in a session for each batch. As you know, both were managing directors of their respective companies during the turnaround periods. They were very much appreciated by the students. August 16, 17, 2018, training program on value thinking for MSc students of data analytics at St. Joseph's College, Commerce, Bangalore. August 2022, 2018, a brand new MDP for senior executives titled Putting People First, LEMS, Spaces of Corporate Design, where the program was offered by Father Ozzy Mascarenhas and Professor Paramjot Singh. November 2013, 2018, offering for the 4th time a doctoral level course in qualitative research methods and methodologies for FPM students and EFPM students. 23 students are participating this year. During the year November 2017, 2018, we have been engaged in offering 9 MDP sessions run by XLRI faculty at XLRI, 16 keynote addresses for various research conferences throughout India, 3 spiritual training programs for fellow Jesuits, several motivational talks to students during orientation days at XLRI, St. Aloysius College, Bangalore, and St. Joseph's College, Bangalore. Several invited planned activities for the years to come. Just briefly, 1, Bombay Stock Exchange, Mumbai, has requested us for a part-time program on corporate response to turbulent markets of today. Bharat Electronics, Bangalore, for a in-company program on value ethics and leadership. Indian Navy, Mumbai, for a certificate program on general management with a thrust on business ethics. Confederation of Indian Industries, CII, MDP on putting people first, legal, ethical, and moral and spiritual, LEMS, spaces of corporate decision making. And finally, Bharat Earth Movers Limited, Bangalore, in-company program on systems thinking approach. We are grateful to Tata Steel for sponsoring the JRD Tata Chair in Business Ethics since December 2013. For the Abraham S.J., Director of XLRI, has been our towering strength all along. Reverend Sister Doris D'Souza AC, currently Provincial of ACs in Patna, and Father Nelson De Silva S.J. have been very helpful in supporting our teaching and research programs throughout the year. Ms. Neha Upadhyay, Senior Research Associate, and Mr. J. Rupani, Research Associate, have worked tirelessly throughout the year for supporting all our activities. We are indebted to many XLRI faculty and staff members for enriching our MDP and in-company programs. A final note, after a 6-month-long triple-blinded review process, I signed a contract with Emerald Publishing for a 2-volume professional book titled Corporate Ethics for Turbulent Markets. Manuscript for Volume 1 was delivered by March 31, 2018, and for Volume 2 by July 31, 2018. We are pleased to announce you that Volume 1 was published already for international markets by October 31, 2018, and Volume 2 is scheduled for March 31, 2019. We were hoping to officially release the first volume today, but the complimentary copies sent by Emerald to us a month ago from London via Singapore have been languishing in Delhi, clearing customs. Instead, we present the front pages of the hardcovers of the first and second books. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you, Father. May I now request Dr. Jennifer Griffin to kindly deliver the oration. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Jennifer Griffin.
Good evening, and thank you, and welcome. A big thank you first to Chairman T.V. Narendra, other dignitaries, the governing board, Father Abraham for all of his work in bringing me here, given the blizzard and the snow of the earlier years, my dean, Kevin Stevens, who is also here, as well as my colleague, Dr. Rup Varma, who was a XLRI distinguished alumni from the 2017 batch. And it's special thanks both to Father Abraham as well as Sandra for bringing me, given the blizzard and sorting out all the different details. So it's a great pleasure to be here. When I realized the list of speakers for tonight included JRD Tata, as well as Nobel laureate Dr. Muhammad Yunus, I must say I start this oration with a sense of awe and humility. It's quite an honor, thank you. After considerable thought, I decided to speak on a topic that's really close to my heart, and one that I think is really important and crucial to the survival and rebirth of businesses across the globe, putting ethics into action, not just the talk, but the walk and the implementation and the execution. So far too often we can talk about and see in the headlines many of the different difficulties. Violence, destruction of lives, livelihoods, questions about humane treatment of workers or immigrants, and we can see that even today with GM. In short, it's that perception of businesses putting profits first before people, as Father Ozzie was talking about earlier. So I'm glad to hear of those different sessions. And so it's that positive impacts of treating people with dignity and respect, enabling others to do good, to have profits and prosperity at the same time. That's not in the headlines. So sadly, one tree falling in the forest makes more noise than 1,000 trees growing. And so tonight, let's focus on the positive. Let's focus on what we can do as individuals, as executives, as employees within organizations, for-profit and universities, because I think you can do a lot. We can do a lot. And India in particular, with the companies after 2013, makes for exciting times. In reality, CSR and giving the spirit of CSR is only limited by your imagination. My own belief, I'm bullish on India getting it right. Why? Quite simply because it's in business's best interest to get it right. Yes, it's the law, but it's your brand, it's your organization, it's your pride. And that bad reputation, as we know, carries a very high cost. So the top 20 firms over the last 3 years in India have contributed 45% of more than $7 billion. And so we now have self-reported details from the reports about how Indian businesses are making an impact with the programs and the activities, all the different partnerships. And so you are making the impossible possible, not just for India, but for the entire world. It does require a shifting of mindsets. It does require a purposefulness and a meaningfulness. And certainly there'll be inevitable turmoil. There'll be the dead ends and the wrong turns, and there'll be all sorts of problems, but you will sort it out. And as Indian businesses learn and sort it out, you will lead a global effort, showing all of us that the impossible is possible, doing good and doing well together. So paraphrasing Al Gini, my Loyola University Chicago colleague, making money is easy. Making a difference is hard. And I think you will be the ones that will be making that difference and showing us all how to make that difference and have profits and prosperity at the same time. You will have that advantage. So tonight, I focus on putting ethics into action. And I'm going to use a why, what, how triad. Why now? Why corporations? Why bother? What should we do if we are to choose as organizations and businesses? And then how then to execute and implement it, because it's often the execution that undermines any great intentions. And so let's look at that triad. Let's see. All right. And so why corporations, why now? Pope Francis in 2015 provided a partial response. And I quote, "Business is a noble vocation directed to producing wealth and improving the world. It can be a fruitful source of prosperity for the area in which it operates, especially if it sees the creation of jobs as an essential part of its service to the common good." So why corporations? In part because they create jobs. And not just jobs, but jobs in dignity and direct benefits through employment for the employees and their families. And indirectly, we know that the benefits of employment ripple across families and neighborhoods and communities. We know it ripples across the supply chain as well as the distribution chain. In fact, it is doubly or triply felt through the ecosystem or the network than just the direct impacts. And so these positive spillover effects, by transferring skills and expertise, incubating new businesses, accelerating different businesses, co-locating businesses, clusters of businesses, make the difference. And they support artisans, farmers, skilled trades. And together they co-create soft and hard infrastructure, whether it's roads or transportation, information services, education, telecom, and it's that what's shared prosperity. Is that co-creation together. Because if you're to start a business, all you need to do is have transportation, which would be a bicycle, a scooter, planes, or trains. You need to have ATM, which would be banking and capital, or a cash point, and you need to have telecom services. So if you have those three bits, you can start a business. And that's what I think a lot of the different organizations are going to start doing. But if you look at the question, why now? So why corporations and then why now? I turn to, let's see. Here we go. Father Raymond C. Baumhart, who's the namesake for the endowed chair that I hold, he made this observation in his Harvard Business School dissertation 50 years ago, and I think it still holds. And he says, quote, "No group in America is more influential than businessmen." And yes, 50 years ago, it was only businessmen. And so I'll add, and women. Their influence, for good or for evil, enters every life and every home many times each day. If this influence is for good, the nation is strengthened. If it is evil, the nation is weakened. The myriad decisions of businessmen and women will significantly determine our national health, ethical as well as economic. And I think his insights at looking at the talk about and the perception about ethics in businesses 50 years ago holds today, not just in America, but in India and around the world. So the time is now. And I say, day in and day out, it's how we choose to live with one another, how we choose to relate together. It's our relationships with one another in businesses, in organizations, in communities. To paraphrase Aristotle, the key question is, how shall we live and live well together? And that's what it means to put, well, that's in part ethics into action. So, but why should corporations bother? And so if you go back to why corporations and why corporations should bother, this takes me back to a story 30 years ago, or more than 30 years ago now, that set me on this path to look at CSR, which it wasn't called that back in the day. And so if you look at the market motivation, otherwise known as the business case, my boss's boss's boss, when I was a young chemical engineer at GE Plastics in the Netherlands, and I was in charge of a tri-country team that was taking a batch reaction into a continuous reaction for Lexan polycarbonate. If you know that, we had gotten the heat and mass transfer, we had gotten the kinetics, we had gotten all the chemistry in the lab set up. And so as part of a tri-country team, I was doing the lab scale. I was the lead in the Netherlands for the lab scale. Dr. Ko was in Japan, and then there was a compatriot in America that would do the pilot plant scale. So my boss's boss's boss question 30 plus years ago was, what's the business case? And I, with my engineer's hat firmly on, said, we can do it. And he repeated it again, what's the business case? And so from that point forward, I started looking at what does the business case mean? He also wanted to know what the government mandate was, because at the time, we had increased productivity, we had increased yield, and we had decreased methylene chloride by turning it into a batch reaction. And so it was a win-win-win, but he was talking about government mandates too. And my answer, because we can, is part of that leadership argument. So what I've been working on for the last 30 years is how is it that we create these narratives to unlock and unleash the potential of all the employees to say, yes, we can do this, and this is then how you create the business case and look at the government and the market, or the government mandates. And so if we look at the business case, which is strategy, there's two different definitions of strategy. This is what I've found. The first one is what you all know in the business school, is total profits equal total revenue minus total cost, right? So the narrative for pro-social voluntary CSR behaviors often goes something like this. Does it increase price? Does it develop new markets? Does it develop new products? Does it create more demand? In other words, it's looking at the revenue. Or is it looking at the cost side of the equation, where CSR is a tax, a fixed cost, variable cost, something that is a drag on profits, a noose around your neck? So let me bring this to the Indian Companies Act of 2013. When you think about the Companies Act of 2013, what comes to mind? Is it a tax? Is it a shakedown? Is it extortion? Is it mandated contributions? Yet one more responsibility on top of an already overloaded plate of must-do. Alternatively, is the Companies Act an opportunity for innovation, an opportunity for growth, an opportunity for investment and growing the business. That side often doesn't get looked at. And it's that tension between how is it that you look at the revenue side as well as the cost side that comes to mind. And that's the mindset. When you think about CSR, is it a cost and an expense, or is it an investment? So, some of my earliest work, there we go. So imagine, you don't have to imagine because it's up here now, a 2x2. So on the x-axis is the standard corporate profits, right? Either it harms or benefits the corporate profits, financial performance. On the y-axis, you've got someone else benefits. It's an impact, a positive or a negative impact on someone else. It could be employees, it could be community, it could be suppliers, it could be creditors. It's someone else benefits. Now, this isn't rocket science. Where do you want to be? If you're a manager, where do you want to be? Oh, you want to be in the win-win. Absolutely, because that's a clear narrative. That's a social entrepreneurship. That's a decrease in carbon, water, energy, so you get more profits. That's, hold on, there we go. Let's keep that there. So that's where you want to be. That's the easy story. Unfortunately, many organizations come to CSR through what I have termed, there we go, the parade of horribles. That's from the back foot, that's from the headlines. And that's when something happens, and then you have to scurry and hurry up and come back to it. And that's a clear activity of where you don't want to be. But for me, as a strategist and an ethicist, the most important quadrant is right here, where you don't have a story for the shareholders yet, but someone else benefits. What's that narrative? What's that story that's being told? Whenever I go into any organization, I always listen. And I listen for this quadrant, because this is where about 80% of the organizations are. And I listen to the words that they use. Because by definition, if it harms the shareholders and benefits someone else from a pure Milton Friedman economist perspective, that's a cost. That's a cost center. Or, alternatively, it's an investment. It's an investment to get to the win-win-win at some future time. It's an investment to at least stay in that place and not drop to the parade of horribles. Maybe it's an investment to alleviate parade of horribles within your own firm or some other firm within your industry. That would be more of an insurance possibility. But how you, as executives, as managers, as employees, how you think about CSR, what the narrative is in the organization, in your team, in your group, that matters. It matters if it's going to be an expense or an investment, and an investment to something else. Because the second definition of strategy is creating the future. That is what managers do and can do every single day. So can you imagine what that future is going to be? Use the business disciplines, use the processes, use your acumen, use your different networks, and build that future to create those win-wins. Yeah, it won't happen every time, but you can at least try for that and create that narrative for that. So that's mindset. What's the mindset on CSR? So that's part of the motivation and the narrative within organizations. All right, so if we turn to government mandate, that's in part what we have with the Indian Companies Act of 2013. Is CSR government's job? Maybe it is, but we know government aid is not working. And government regulation, by definition, means market failure. Businesses aren't taking care for some externality or some unmet need is not being addressed through market mechanisms. Alternatively, government action can provide seed money or incentives, and that's where the Companies Act really happens. It can spark behavior change by setting a minimal threshold of acceptable businesses. And so we're seeing what those differences are given the different self-reported activities in the Companies Act of 2013. Last month, I was in New York City at a conference, and there was a presentation on the Companies Act of 2013 and some of the different activities that are going on. And so people are looking at that, and researchers are looking at that around the world. But my argument is, maybe it is government mandate, but maybe it's in the company's best interest to make that investment yourself, to provide services, maintain that infrastructure. Businesses have that 20-year, 30-year, century-long perspective, and they likely want to be in business for that long. And so Father Baumhart's insights, I think, are still relevant. Businessmen and women are very influential for good or for evil, and they affect a nation's ethical and economic health. So while governments may come and go, and who's in power may come and go, when it comes to skills building, long-term projects, nation building, maybe it's in private companies' best interests. So there's a fast-moving consumer goods company that created a railroad spur outside of St. Petersburg. Was that part of their core competence? No. Were they required to do that? No. Was it in their best interest to do that? Yes, because they were able to develop it, create it, and increase access to market for them, the other businesses, as well as the entire community. And it's not just in India that these needs are. It's around the world. In my hometown of Chicago, Illinois Toolworks, ITW, has adopted a school, increased employability, created support networks, and developing mentoring for plumbers, carpenters, and all sorts of trades. And so, with minimal thresholds set down by government mandates, the question is the government mandates, is that the minimal threshold, or is that the ceiling? And that's where business executives can decide. Is that the minimal that you shoot for, or are you going to go beyond and meaningfully go beyond? And for me, that's where ethical leadership comes into play, the third piece of putting profits and prosperity together. And so this is the part about creating the future. And this is the part where we don't have to look far for this. Leaders unleash the creative spirits of employees. They ensure, for example, as JRD Tata did when building Tisco, and I quote, plenty of space for lawns and greens, large areas for football, hockey, and parks, earmarking areas for Hindu temples, mosques, and Christian churches. And so setting that up from the get-go makes a difference to how it is that you put profits and prosperity all together. Now, if we move to, if that's the why now, why corporations, and lots of different ways to think about putting profits and prosperity together, whether it is market motivation, government mandate, or ethical leadership. The key then comes back to what Father Baumhart said. Is it for good or for evil? Oh, there we go. Hold on. And JRD Tata would be the epitome of ethical leadership, and I use him in many of my classes. Because as Father Ozzie and Father Abraham and Sister D'Souza's in their edited volume from 2017 says, they quote JRD Tata, "Do not ask what is legal thing to do, but ask what is the right thing we should do. Do not do only what is the right thing, but do it rightly and do it for the right reasons." That's ethical leadership, getting the thinking, the talking, and the doing aligned. All right, So now if that's the why, let's go to the what, and then we'll get to the how. But what is corporate responsibility? What is it not? And again, often it is defined by others through headlines. I've written that CSR is a Tower of Babel. It means different things to different people at different times. And for many businesses and business managers, the rational response to that would be to throw up their hands and say, let's wait for certainty, let's wait for clarity, let's wait to understand what CSR really means. But particularly here in India, you don't have that chance to wait. You must act. You have been asked to act. And so the question I ask you is, what do you want your company known for? And so I pulled these headlines from the Financial Times in the last 15 or 18 months. Your supplier confirms all of its products affected by your company's flaws. Federal government to hold public inquiry into your industry's misconduct. That's Australia, and that's going on, and CEOs and boards are turning over. Your company says data woes. Your shares plunge. Your company pays the price or pays a heavy price for customer carelessness. Your company joins a list of corporate misfires with poor handling of crises. So often it is defined by others, activists, headlines, the media, the government, someone else. So let me ask you the same question that I asked my graduate and undergraduate students. Thinking about the future, because that's the other definition of strategy, and thinking out 5 years, because that's what literature on corporate governance says. What do you want the headlines to read about your company? Because there are also Financial Times headlines, fewer still, in the last 15 months, that says your country learns to harvest its formidable solar power opportunities. That was Chile. Your rivals take aim at your stream of success. Your company launches cutting-edge initiative. So that's the what. What do you want to be known for? What do you want your headlines to be? Now, how? How is traditionally associated with philanthropy? CSR and philanthropy go hand in glove, and I would call that CSR 1.0. Philanthropic foundations, corporate foundations, you've got great examples here with Tata. And so this how becomes, how do you choose? How do you choose with the market motivations, the business of business, the government mandates, the external pressures and demands? Is CSR then in that messy middle? Or is it that sweet spot? And if it's that sweet spot, it's that inimitable intangibles often that make the difference. And that's what makes your organization better than and have a competitive advantage. That's why employees want to work for you rather than your rival down the street. And that's where CSR then can become interwoven within the organization and make the difference because your employees want to work for you. And this is what is happening now because we're shifting the focus away from philanthropy, away from the 2% or 5% of tax breaks to the 95 or 98% of profits of how you make your money, how organizations make that profit. And that means looking at employees. That means looking at the different types of impacts, looking at the types of funding and financing, looking at the products, looking at the information base. And so rather than philanthropy, the shift is to both internally looking at impacts, but externally selecting judiciously different issues, industries, or nation states, and how then are you going to build upon positively and build that nation state capability. So this is the most difficult one. This is looking at industries. If you take the mobile phone industry, for example, on the horizontal axis, in the middle, you have the economic value chain and supply chain. That's the network. That's the traditional way that we in business schools around the world look at the business. You're the company in the middle. You've got your supply chain and your distribution, and that's all economic. And now with TBL, triple bottom line, you're looking at the social as well as the environmental impacts, in addition to the economic impacts. And so my question to you, in your firm, in your industry, are you mapping the issues and the impacts all the way back to the OEM? Are you going all the way forward to the customer and the customer of the customer, and then forward on there, and then cycling it back? Because if you're not mapping it, I can assure you that my students are mapping it, and there's other people that are looking at it. So understand what those issues are. Understand where the impacts are, and choose to address those issues. Because part of the key thing here is that there are organizations that are doing great. I could keep talking about Tata because it has phenomenal stories, but here's a different one that you might be familiar with is Unilever, Anglo-Dutch, and it's Hindustan Unilever. So its hand-washing campaign to reach billions of people by 2020 has been phenomenal. And so it's to improve health and hygiene. And supporters would say, what a great thing to alleviate diarrhea, to take care of waterborne diseases, help this generation and the next to prevent treatable diseases by creating good, healthy habits. And the naysayers, the antagonists would say, oh, it's just a marketing campaign, free media exposure, they sell soaps, shampoos, dishwashing anyway. And I would say they're both right. But the fact remains, and I think this is the biggest accolade to Hindustan Lever, is that their competitors are trying to copy them too, because of the integrated nature of the programs and activities and mechanisms. It has so embedded the entire ethos of the organization that it has truly made a difference, and it's really difficult to copy. And so it's these commingling of issues, and it's this understanding how that happens and how you as organizations can make that happen is what's key. Maybe you're in logistics or ICT industries and you want to move products from point A to point B. Are you hosting hackathons so that you can help others with supply and supply chain issues? So there's all sorts of different issues that can be addressed. Plastic bottles, recycling, the circular economy. If you move to nation states, Bayer, a pharmaceutical company, when trying to enter into the Chinese market, eventually won partial approval because it was addressing diseases and health outcomes. And so that ability to go into new markets is in large part because of some of the pro-social activities that are tied to the business and integrated with the strategy itself. Yet a word of caution, be quick to pivot. Loyola, a French company, cosmetics company, when it was going into South America, it had undertaken activities with climate change. But when you asked the communities in South America what they wanted, it wasn't addressing climate change. They wanted homelessness and nutrition and transportation and education, employability and the like. And so L'Oreal pivoted. So be quick to pivot. All right. Going forward, penultimate slide. What's needed to put ethics into action? Summarize, tone at the top matters. Absolutely matters. The Companies Act of 2013 and other CSR multilateral initiatives have creative incentives and penalties. But rules-based regulation can only succeed, in my opinion, if these rules are matched with principled leadership, decency, humanity, honesty, corporate leadership. Talk the talk, walk the walk. Putting ethics into action won't happen unless you believe in it every day with your activities and your actions. In short, for you and your team and your organization, Is CSR an expense or an investment? And an investment into what future that you want to create? As powerful role models, employees watch senior leaders carefully every single day. And as Peter Drucker famously said, culture eats strategy for breakfast every day. Second, choose wisely. Rather than letting others choose, you as an organization have an opportunity to choose what you stand for, what you want to be known for, what impacts you want to have both inside the organization as well as outside with the many different communities that you serve. Adam Smith had it right. Division of labor and coordination integration are required. And we're really good at division of labor with all the different disciplines within any different business school. Look at the silos of specialties, the proliferation of divisions. Yet we also need to be dot connectors too. Rather than not my problem, not my budget, not my vertical, change the question. How do we become part of the solution? What impact, what problem are we solving? What impact are we having? What problem are we solving? Third, big, bold initiatives and letting 1,000 flowers bloom. And so in part, the Companies Act of 2013 is about partnering and public-private partnering. But my argument is PPPs, public-private partners, and some in the US, in particular, the USAID, said that that's the only way forward. Yet free riders and collective action issues cannot be wished away, even when collaborating for good or the intentions are well. And so being in a collaboration, in my opinion, is not enough to move the needle. Perhaps we also need to redefine the scale of social issues, taking one small step at a time. One village, one household, one community, with our feet firmly on the ground, all these many different activities, we can let 1,000 flowers bloom. So just imagine thousands of lotus flowers continually adapting and adjusting, all the while blooming. 4, this should go without saying, trust remains essential. It remains essential as part of business, and particularly with CSR and how CSR is integrated into profits and prosperity. With less reliance on international or institutional networks and intermediaries, decreased trust in corporations, governments, institutions around the world, there's a shift towards networks and that resilience of networks as well as local provisioning. And so creating those interdependencies becomes more important than ever. Finally, last but not least, pick your partners, because you are going to have to co-create together. Maybe not just all in big, bold initiatives, but you will be working with and for others. Find folks willing to talk the talk and walk the walk. Hire based on those that are ready to change, ready to experiment. And it's that readiness to experiment, that readiness to think about it and think differently is what we're finding is really important. So double down on that ampersand of creating profits and prosperity. Now, having been down this journey for 30 plus years, and having been at a couple of different universities, and being erroneously introduced in Mexico City as being from a Jesuit university, I offer this unpaid advertisement. Consider hiring a Jesuit-trained graduate. So what can you do if you want to believe that ethics matter? I'd say hire a Jesuit-trained graduate. It's part and parcel of their education. What can you do if you want ethical, responsible leaders? I say hire a Jesuit-trained graduate. What can you do if you want leaders sensitive to their organization's impact, both financially, on the environment, and their communities? I say hire a Jesuit-trained graduate. They live it, they breathe it, they believe it, they see it. It's part and parcel of their DNA in so many different ways that makes that intangible difference. So my final words, I look forward to following your progress in person, through archival research, through your CSR reports, through all your different stories, because we need to hear more about your stories of putting profits and prosperity together. We need to be inspired. You will be creative. And so it's just a matter of sharing with the world that the seemingly impossible is actually possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Griffin, for your thought-provoking and inspiring oration. Dr. Griffin will now take questions from the audience.
Dr. Griffin, I'm Father Coelho, a Jesuit product employed. I want to say that to move that bold process that you spoke about, making 1,000 flowers bloom, I like that concept so much. I would like to propose to all industrialists present here, how about making 1 billion flowers in India bloom? I'm saying this because there's going to be a colossal unemployment problem in India in the years to come. And I am very concerned and anxious because of this. I would like a response from you, Dr. Griffin.
Thank you, Father. And I completely agree, let 1 billion flowers bloom, and I think it will happen here. Because as Pope Francis said at the very beginning, or as I quoted him at the very beginning, the #1 impact of organizations and business schools, for that matter, is employability and creating either jobs and or businesses. And so when we graduate, or when we graduate different students from the different business schools, are they looking for jobs, or are they looking to create businesses that will employ other people? And that, I think, is going to be a big shift, and that will help those 1 billion flowers to bloom, is that we're not just creating jobs, but we're creating business owners and future business leaders. Social entrepreneurship. It's incubators. It's a lot of the things that I'm hearing that you're doing here already at XLRI. Does everybody get an A? Does that mean?
Ronnie DeCosta, batch of 1970 of XLRI. It's a difficult thing. You mentioned, is it an investment or is it an expense? But you also went down to say, what is CSR? Should it be top going down in a company, or is it bottom generated? Which do you prefer?
I don't have a preference for that, but thank you for your question. What I do have a preference for is making the difference, making the impact, because there are lots of different examples of top-down, and so it's more coordinated. And there's lots of examples of very specific initiatives. Coca-Cola, for example, the first CSR report in Coca-Cola was in the former Yugoslavia. And then Coca-Cola in Atlanta and headquarters said, oh, that's kind of cool, let's take that up, and then they built it and expanded it. And there's other examples of other companies that have started with lots of different, very local, adapted, very sensitive to the local community's activities. And then as they aggregated it and they centralized it, they had to let go of some. And it's the letting go of the local communities when they went to centralize it that actually was more the difficulty. So for me, it can be top-down, and then it's more coordinated and centralized, but it might be slower and it might not have that direct impact. On the other hand, if it's very, very locally focused, and that's the traditional focus of CSR, is that it's the country managers or the community managers or the super engaged employees that say, let's do that. Then the challenge becomes, how is it that you roll it up? so that you can make the argument when the finances aren't there. For example, during the global financial recession or the global financial crisis, a lot of those different activities were cut. They were noble, they were making an impact, but they couldn't tie it back to the business. And so the problem with the completely decentralized is that you still have to tie it back to the core of the business, and how does this build on the intangibles, either addressing the laws that are required or addressing some of the capabilities in the markets that we want to grow into. So it's not an either or for me, but how is that you get the centralized commonality and the themes that we want to be known as a business for this or a corporation for this, but we also want to have that deeply local dynamic. And as I'm looking at the axes, it's local responsiveness is here on the x-axis, and it's the commonality of the programs here on the y-axis. And so that's what I'm looking at. But you got to have that. It's more like a transnational corporation. You've got to be looking at both and being able to adapt that. And it's really hard. But Hindustan Lever, for example, has done that. And it is really remarkable, but it's really hard to imitate. So let 1,000 flowers, let 1 billion flowers bloom. But it will happen in lots of different ways in lots of different places. And it might be through processes.
Dr. Griffin, first of all, on behalf of the entire XLRI student community, profound gratitude for having come over and delivered this wonderful oration. It was really beneficial.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just one quick question. You speak about mandated ethics, government mandate. We tend to be a little bit skeptical of mandating and legislating good behavior. Right. How do you think this is going to be sustainable? Is it the right approach? What approach do you suggest where it comes inherently, intrinsically, not necessarily mandated or imposed from outside, because we don't think that's going to sustain for long. The moment the mandates are diluted, the whole thing falls apart. Am I being too much of a skeptic, or do you agree or disagree? Like, know your response. Thank you.
That's a fabulous question. Thank you for that. So prior to being at Loyola, Chicago, I was based in Washington, D.C., 6 blocks from the White House, and there were courses on strategy and public policy, and so I was teaching that with the ethics component too. And so getting all three together, working in the same direction, is actually really critical, because it's not just about the market, and it's not just about the government, either what is today or might be tomorrow, but it's also that leadership. And so that's actually a key question, and my quick response would be, you can't comply your way to greatness. And so if you're just complying, and in some places that's a gold star for CSR in some countries, that just complying gets you to that best of list. But by definition, CSR is pro-social voluntary behavior. And now that it's mandated here in India, it's slightly different, but I think the ethos remains, is that if you are just complying, if you're just treating it as the aspiration, that if we hit the bar, if we hit the legal minimum, that's enough, thank you very much, hands done, and off we go to the next activity. But that bar keeps creeping up. And if you're a multinational working across multiple jurisdictions, which bar do you choose? Do you choose based on the different country that you're operating in? Or do you as the firm say, let's think about this, what bar do we choose? And that comes from the inside. And that's one of the key dynamics, is CSR from the inside out. And as a strategist, I would say, yeah, build on your capabilities, build on your competencies, build on your intangibles. Or is it from the outside in and the demands? And there's probably a bit of both. But predominantly, are you thinking about what it means to you? And then you might be setting the bar for future compliance. You might be at the table setting regulation for others. And there's lots of different examples of that. That you are able then to use regulation to decrease mobility or increase barriers to entry for other rivals. You know, so there's lots of different stories about that, and we can get into that. But it is really important of how you see government and how you see those mandates. Is it the threshold, the base, Is it the aspiration or the most that we will do? Choose.
Suresh, class of 91 and hopefully class of 22. I had two questions for you, but let's take one first, building on your current response. My view is that the CSR thing that we've done in the country is an easy one out, because it's a tick box, pay the money, and it's akin to finding people when you pay money. And what you said seems to indicate that there's a hope that the external push will result in a internal, outpouring to ensure that one does the right thing. I'd be negative and say that's hardly possible. Your comments on that?
On the back side of my slides, which I don't think that we'll get to, I have created, and I've kept it updated for a number of different years, the best of lists. So the most admired company, the best of workers, the best of whatever. And so if you look at those lists of that's the external push, or it's the ratings and rankings game as we want to be known for the best of. I literally have, I think it's 4 or 5 different slides, and there's no commonality with the methodology, there's no commonality with the firms, there's no commonality with the companies. And so a lot of companies choose the list that they want to do, and then it becomes a game, whether it's GRI rankings or things like that. And that's fine, that works, until there's a hiccup. And then when they're not the best of, BP with the oil spill, VW with the car accident, and then suddenly everyone is surprised that they aren't best of, because they were playing the ratings and rankings, in part, but also because you need to look inside at the processes, and are the employees buying into what is being talked about? And that's part of that purpose dynamic of an organization, is that CSR often starts inside. That if what you're saying outside, or what you're saying to report on the GRI, for example, the Global Reporting Initiative, if it's not being reflected inside with the employees, then maybe you're missing one of your key audiences and one of your key stakeholders. And so that's the dynamic that I'm talking about. And so yes, there is lots of ratings and rankings, and a lot of organizations are doing it, and it's really successful, but there's a limit to that success is what we're finding. Go right ahead, second question, if that answers this one.
Yeah, thank you. The second one's a thesis I've had for some years, and I started my work life in a Parsi-owned company, much like the Tatas are. My take is that even in a bad case and a bad barrel, they can be good apples. And the good apples seem to emerge from promoters, owners, founders of companies, and maybe a legacy of 100, 150 years. And there's something that seems to seep into some of these organizations. And no matter what the pulls and pushes of the environment are, there are some who seem to consistently rise above the muck and do well. And is that your experience from research? I'd love to hear your comments on that.
The research suggests, and it's just a suggestion because it hasn't been empirically verified, but the suggestion is that there are 2 different types of organizations. Those that believe it and do it very meaningfully, whether it's family-owned, small, medium, large businesses, but they do it and do CSR in very different, meaningful ways, very tiny ways, but it permeates the entire culture and the entire organization and the decision-making. And then there are those that put it on after the fact. But that is quite literally from Journal of Marketing, where you're looking at social responsibility and irresponsibility, and you're looking at the relationship between profits prior and profits post. And that whole dynamic of do you need profits prior, that hasn't been proved out actually. That you can be doing these pro-social voluntary activities that go beyond government mandates to let those billion flowers bloom, and make a difference without profits, because a lot of it is intangibles and a lot of it is how you treat or hire your employees, and that's part and parcel of not an extra expense. And so that's what it's suggesting. We haven't empirically tested it. You know, academic research is behind the curve, and so you in your own organizations, I would say that you know when you go to interview with different organizations, do they talk the talk and walk the walk? Can you get that sense of the ethos? And different organizations, you can hear about it in the different decisions that they make and how the different conversations go.
Good evening, ma'am. Wonderful insights.
Thank
There's
you.
a question in my mind regarding employee volunteering as a strategy to do CSR. So, one way of looking at it is that employee volunteering will create a culture of CSR within the organization. So the concept is that some hours from the work are given by the employees to do CSR around. So a great strategy in a way, but the dilemma that comes to my mind is that this is coming at a cost. So man hours are going. So there was an audit wherein a question came that whatever is the cost, would it be better that you give it to a professional organization which is able to do a better job with the same cost? So how to balance it?
Thank you for your question. It's a classic question that I don't think has an answer, so I'm going to attempt to do it, to put at least more questions back to you. So if you look at employability and employee relationships with CSR, that is the longest standing, most statistically significantly held relationship between CSR and employees by any number of different studies across sectors in different nations on different topics of employability and employee relations. The ability to attract and retain top talent is often embedded within the CSR and enhanced by CSR activities. So that's often where organizations start, if they're going to start with CSR, is with the employees, because they have to talk the talk, and the employees then become the ambassadors for the organization, rather than the organization speaking out on themselves, because there is hesitancy about touting your own horn. And so it's the employees then that become the ambassadors. So that's a key aspect of it. But then your question becomes, what then do you do? Do you do the volunteer hours? Do you do the matching of employee contributions? Do you have safe workplaces? Do you have, daycare or whatever it might be? I'm thinking US-based or Western-based, but whatever the employee incentive or activity might be. That's where the why and the what and the how come together, and that's where you've got to decide. Let me give you a for instance. A multilateral bank based in DC said we were going to do CSR, and our CSR initiative was going to be matching employee contributions. Wherever you want to give, we will match at 1 time, 2 time, 3 time, whatever the policy was. And that was fine, because it made the employees happy, productivity, morale, engagement, and we know all of that happens. But when they were pressed, and I don't know if it was shareholders, I don't know if it was activists, I don't know if they inside were asking, so what impact has that money or those contributions been made? Come to find out, this bank and their employees were supporting Georgetown Prep. So it's a preparatory school that doesn't necessarily have the most vulnerable population. So it wasn't going to, for instance, Northeast DC. It wasn't going to the marginalized or vulnerable populations. It was going to create even more of the divide. And so when they started to look at the impact, not just the contribution, but the impact of the contribution, which would be the next step, then they started changing their policies and processes and their initiatives to align with what type of impact that multilateral bank wanted to have. Now, Georgetown Prep is a wonderful school. I'm not saying anything bad about that. But when the organization realized that maybe that wasn't where they wanted to do their matching of the programs, or they needed to do that in addition to lots of their other programs, And so it's when the pushback comes of what difference did you make? What impact did you have? Not just on what are you doing. That's when often you start seeing the why, what, how narratives become more in alignment. And it's often through the employees that that happens. Thank you.
One last question, please.
Good evening, Dr. Griffin. I'm Rajesh Kanjani. I'm here for the EFM batch, the first term. You talked about trust here, and when we talk about trust in the current world of all cat and mouse games happening and vendor contract.
Can you speak closer?
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry. In the current world, when we talk about trust, there is all cat and mouse games happening. There are globalization happening, vendor-employer relationships, and all those things. Even when you talk about trust, there is even employer-employee trust also that comes into picture. Right. So, how do you suggest building that trust?
Do what you say and say what you do. And that's the most basic. That's what responsibility means, that you're going to do what you say you're going to do and you're going to make good on it. But it's also accounting for the different impacts, both positive and negative impacts that you might have either within your organization through your supplier distribution. And it's those multiplier effects is what is catching up a lot of the different firms, is that they're looking just at their direct effects. But if you look at, for example, there was a recent study, again, it was Unilever and Oxfam in Indonesia about alleviating poverty. So the direct effects of a company are outweighed by 2 or 3 times by the network effects. And that's where you need to really start looking at the networks. And that's where trust is often lost. Back to trust. There's actually, trust is empirically and conceptually different than distrust. They're actually 2 different things. So when you're looking at trust and you're looking at favorability of organizations, you actually need to look at the same time unfavorability. Because they are different, they aren't, 49-51. It actually is very different dynamics. And so that unfavorability rating is really key. And there's all sorts of different organizations that are looking and measuring and creating metrics on trust. And I would say that the trust starts inside with the employees. And they then become your ambassadors. And then it's your community members or your suppliers. Here's an example from petrochemical company that was in Sydney Harbor. And there was a fire in Sydney Harbor. And the employees were called to the plant, and they were taking the ships and the boats to get to where the plant was, and they were talking about, on the boat with all the different community members on the ferry, they were talking about the fire, and there were people on the boat that were standing up and sticking up for, and it's called the third-party advocates for Shell and the petrochemical activities that was going on in Sydney Harbor. And that's what trust is. Do people give you that benefit of a doubt? Because it's not a matter of if a hiccup is going to happen, it's a matter of when a hiccup is going to happen. And so are you given that benefit of the doubt? Will other people come and say, no, actually they're a good company, they just had a hiccup? Or are you a bad company doing yet another bad thing? And that's a very different sort of dynamic about trust. And it's trust that goes with the public trust, the government trust, and so you can have all different types of trust, and you've got to decide which ones are the most important if you're a manager of what types of trust that you want to build. But at the very basic, it's do what you say and say what you do. That's what responsibility is. And do right by both your employees, but also your organization. And as from JRD said, it's not just compliance, and it's not just doing the right thing, but do it rightly in the right way, regardless.
May I now request Mr. T.V. Narendran, Chairman of XLRI Board of Governors and CEO and Managing Director of Tata Steel to please come up on the stage and present mementos to Dr. Jennifer Griffin. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. T.V. Narendran. Thank you, sir. May I request Dr. Ashish Kepani, Dean Academics of XLRI, to give the vote of thanks. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Ashish Pani.
I would be remembered as an honest man who tried to do what he thought was right, JRD Tata. Honorable Speaker of this evening, Dr. Jennifer J. Griffin, respected Chairman T.V. Narendran, dear Father E. Abraham, Director XLRI, Dr. Stephen Kevins, Loyola, Chicago, Father Oswald Mascarens, the Tata Chair, Professor of Business Ethics, senior members of the Tata Group of Companies, alumni, more specifically to welcome to all the 50 years alumni who are here for the get-together. Give a big hand to all the 50 years alumni. My dear students, faculty, staff, and ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Jennifer, we are extremely grateful to you in this today this evening. You talk on an important topic, the putting in action, the ethics in action. You talked about what is corporate social responsibility, what is not corporate social responsibility, what are the corporates should focus on, what are their responsibility, how to develop that responsibility, what they should do now. And this will be good input to all of our students who will be going and working in the business organizations. So we are extremely grateful to you for this wonderful interaction in today this evening. I am extremely grateful to T.V. Narendran, Chairman, and Father Director E. Abraham for the wholehearted support for this cause, the service of the greater good. My special thanks to Father Jerry, Dean Administration, and his office for the special arrangements he has made for this event. Last but not the least, the student volunteers without whom this event, organizing this event is impossible. Thank you all and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the national anthem.
जनगण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तब शुभ नामे जागे तब शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तब जय गाथा जनगण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे
May I request all of you to join us for tea and snacks in front of the Tata Auditorium, and thank you.